The only people who saw your currency war simulation firsthand were high-ranking members of the Pentagon and the intelligence community. Can you walk me through a similar scenario?
If I lay this out for you, I want to make it clear. This is hypothetical and extreme. We'll start with the players and the backstory. Situation 1, Israel and Iran are on the brink of war. We're assuming that either new information has come to light or that Iran went off the deep end. Situation 2, tensions between China and the U.S. are growing as both countries accuse the other of waging a currency war with excessive money printing and quantitative easing. China reads the tea leaves and decides they need 4,000 metric tons of gold in order to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. in any kind of financial showdown. So they continue to order their mines across the globe to directly deliver gold to their government and under military supervision so there are no leaks. Let's say from 2009 through today, they've secretly stacked up 2,000 tons, and they aren't telling anybody. They still need another 2,000 tons. Now this is where the $1.4 trillion war chest in China's sovereign wealth fund comes into play. A few years back, using back channels and money from their sovereign wealth funds, let's say China sets up a seemingly unconnected web of hedge funds in the Cayman Islands, Malta, Cyprus, places like that. So for years they play the long game, acting as a sleeper cell. Most of the day-to-day investing is on the up and up. But what this web of hedge funds has also been doing is gradually buying up more and more blocks of gold futures contracts. Futures are derivatives that use leverage to cheaply control large amounts of an investment. To give you an idea, if you were to invest $1 in a gold futures contract, you could control $15 worth of gold. Now, when those contracts are up, China can close them out, roll them into new ones, or, and here's where it gets interesting, they could take physical delivery of the gold itself. So let's say through this web of hedge funds, China is holding futures contracts that control an additional 2,000 metric tons of gold. Now they've got their magic number, 4,000 tons, but nobody knows it. So, situation 1, Iran and Israel are on the brink of war. Situation 2, tensions are rising between the United States and China, with China secretly stockpiling massive amounts of gold. That's the backstory.
Given what you've already revealed, that doesn't sound impossible.
Now let's run the war game simulation. Fearing for their safety, Israel launches a surprise strike on Iranian nuclear facilities using air raids and cyber warfare. Iran strikes back by closing the Strait of Hormuz with mines, blocking off over a third of the oil on the sea. They then launch intermediate-range missiles at Israel. War escalates in the Middle East. Oil prices have surged to $200 a barrel. Gold hits $2,500 an ounce. China's gold futures contracts are now controlling north of $176 billion worth of physical gold. Panic causes the euro to collapse in value. The president addresses the nation, declaring that the U.S. military will do whatever it takes to protect Israel and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The collapse in the euro is now leading to a loss of confidence in all paper currencies. Fear spreads throughout the international community that all major economies could sink into a Great Depression. This time the world doubts the ability of the Fed and the European Central Bank to rescue the economy. The recession revealed how fragile America really is. Gold hits $3,000 an ounce. The Chinese stake is now worth $212 billion. The Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party meets to discuss their options. They're feeling the strain of the price hikes to oil, and given their current tension with the U.S., they have serious doubts in our economy and the dollar. From China's perspective, gold is the safest bet. Their gold futures contracts expire in a week, and they've decided they want to take possession of all 2,000 tons. Secret cables are sent to this Chinese embassy behind us, informing the diplomats of the decision. However, a CIA asset in Beijing learns of their plans. Immediately, the President, Treasury Secretary, CIA Director, and Fed Chairman gather to consider China's gold play. They know there isn't enough gold available in the markets to meet China's demand. They can't show their cards yet, but they start debating the options. China's secret web of hedge funds begins giving notice that they demand physical delivery for their gold futures contracts. Gold becomes difficult to obtain and hits $3,500 per ounce. China's stake is now worth $247 billion. Oil hits $300 a barrel as the conflict in the Middle East continues. More paper currencies collapse around the world, causing a global panic. Under direction from the White House, the Fed holds emergency meetings with COMEX. They oversee the gold futures contracts. COMEX uses its emergency powers to freeze gold at $3,500 per ounce and, as a direct strike to China's interests, bans physical deliveries of gold on the futures contracts. COMEX has the power to do this. China reacts to this decision by declaring it an act of financial warfare by the U.S. government. Markets are already fragile because of the situation in the Middle East, and major economies are on the brink of depression because of the oil price spike. The conflict between Iran and Israel is slowing down as the United Nations intervenes to expedite a ceasefire. But in China, the currency war is about to escalate dramatically. The Chinese leadership feels they are backed into a corner. They realize they can't dump their $1.2 trillion in U.S. Treasuries because the president would freeze the market, and that would be mutually assured financial oblivion. But they do have another financial weapon of mass destruction on the table, because as the currency wars were heating up with America, they weren't just stockpiling gold futures contracts. They also had their web of hedge funds take positions in a separate block of highly leveraged derivatives. Their sovereign wealth funds put $150 billion in play here, which is controlling $2.25 trillion worth of investments. Suspecting their original plan was compromised due to a security leak, China takes precautions to ensure this is kept quiet. Out of the blue, China orders this web of hedge funds to sell these secret holdings all at the same time. In one single day, they dump the equivalent of the entire GDP of India or Canada or Russia on Wall Street. An economic Pearl Harbor we never saw coming. Americans panic, the Dow plunges, our dollar is decimated. The contagion spreads to London, Tokyo, everywhere. There's a run on banks as everything starts collapsing. Trading is frozen on Wall Street. But China is not done. Thanks to Washington, D.C., they've tapped into our FedWire and Treasury auction network. So their hackers unleash a cyber warfare attack on the U.S. to disrupt our financial exchanges, bank transactions, the power grid, and the internet backbone. This time the White House and Pentagon meet, and all options are on the table. This is a 1 in a million kind of situation. But with my help, it's exactly the kind of crisis the Pentagon and the national intelligence community prepare for.
What you just described sounds like something out of a movie. And now, of course, that's a very extreme scenario. But given America's current path, what do you think is a more likely outcome?
Let me be very clear. The United States' role in this currency war is setting the stage for a global financial meltdown. Today, the risk is not only of a serious panic or depression, like what occurred during the first currency war, but also of a collapse of the entire monetary system. Americans lost $50 trillion from the recession, nearly 40% of their net worth on average. I believe the outcome of this currency war could be twice as bad or worse. America is nowhere near a real recovery, despite what Washington says. So what final QE number we see, whether it's 4, 5, or 10, I have no idea. But the Fed's not done. China's economy is slowing down. Europe is a heartbeat away from economic Armageddon. So we face a future of more money printing, more monetary easing, and more currency war aggressions across the globe. For the United States, I personally feel we're going to be hit by strong inflation in the coming years. 4% a year will rise to 8%, 10%, then possibly 20%. And from there, it could get worse and worse. I think the stock market is in another bubble, and I can see another large crash coming of at least 50% within 3 years. And I think the dollar's days as the world's reserve currency are coming to a close. This is just with our current path. We don't need any of the unconventional currency war weapons to come into play. But just imagine if they do. I think if Americans become more aware of the situation, they'll be able to take measures to protect their financial security, because that needs to begin immediately.